The Vraxian High Command never expected a response, let alone one so swift. Their distress beacon, activated in desperation as the Karathi Armada descended upon their home planet, had been transmitting for barely 3 galactic cycles when their long-range sensors detected an anomaly entering their star system. "Unknown vessel approaching, Admiral Lyrex," reported Lieutenant Mavis, her 6-fingered hands dancing across the holographic interface. "Configuration matches no known species in our database." Admiral Lyrex's cranial ridges flushed a deep indigo, a sign of both hope and apprehension. "Show me." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a sleek obsidian craft cutting through space like a predator. No visible weapon systems, minimal energy signature, yet somehow it had traversed the vast distance between stars in a fraction of the time any known technology should allow. "It's responding to our distress call," whispered Commander Kelra, disbelief evident in her voice. "But who are they?" The vessel slowed as it approached Vraxis Prime, ignoring hails from the planetary defense network. It simply waited. Below, on the surface, the Vraxian population huddled in emergency shelters as the first wave of Karathi bombardment lit up the upper atmosphere. The once peaceful Vraxians, scholars and scientists who had expanded through the stars with knowledge rather than weapons, faced extinction at the hands of the militaristic Karathi Empire. "Admiral," Mavis called out, voice trembling, "the unknown vessel is changing." On screen, the black ship seemed to shimmer, its hull flowing like liquid metal, components reconfigured, revealing an array of weapon systems that had been perfectly concealed moments before. But more alarming was what emerged from within the craft, a single transport pod accelerating toward the planet's surface. "Track it," Lyrex commanded. "Landing coordinates, place it." Mavis hesitated, rechecking her readings. Directly at the Karathi ground invasion's forward base. The pod streaked through the atmosphere, a bright comet against the darkening sky. The Karathi ground forces, nearly 50,000 strong, paused their advance to witness its descent. Their supreme commander, Varrock the Merciless, ordered his troops to surround the landing site, 500 elite warriors forming a perimeter, energy weapons primed. When the pod touched down, the air went still. Steam hissed from hydraulic seals as the hatch slowly opened. The Karathi tightened their grips on their weapons. A single figure emerged. Not an army, not a squad of elite soldiers, just one. The being stood upright on 2 legs, encased in armor unlike anything the Karathi had encountered, a seamless exoskeleton that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its helmet revealed nothing of the creature inside, only a smooth, featureless faceplate that shifted subtly, adapting to the environment. "Identify yourself," Varrock demanded through his translator. "Or be destroyed." The figure turned toward him slowly, deliberately. When it spoke, its voice carried through the air with unnerving clarity, requiring no translation. "I am Operative Eridani, human. Project Nemesis." The figure's stance shifted slightly. "You were warned once to leave peaceful systems alone." "There, won't be a second warning." Varrock laughed, the sound echoing across his assembled forces. "One creature against my army? Your species must be as foolish as it is arrogant." The human tilted its head slightly. "This isn't a battle." The faceplate cleared momentarily, revealing ice-blue eyes devoid of emotion. "This is a demonstration." Before Varrock could respond, the human moved, a blur of motion almost too fast to track. The nearest Karathi soldier's armor crumpled inward as if struck by an invisible hammer. 2 more fell in rapid succession, their neural systems overloaded by devices the human had attached in passing. The Karathi opened fire, but their energy weapons seemed to bend around the human's armor, finding targets among their own ranks instead. And, as the sun set on Vraxis Prime, the real horror was only beginning to unfold. The Karathi war machine had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade alone. Their strategy was always the same: overwhelming force, brutal efficiency, and absolutely no mercy. Supreme Commander Varrock had never failed in a campaign, until now. "Fall back! Defensive positions!" he bellowed, watching in disbelief as the Yi lone human cut through his elite guard like they were training holograms. The being moved with impossible speed, its armor seeming to anticipate weapon fire seconds before it occurred. Aboard the Vraxian Command Center, Admiral Lyrex and his officers watched the battle unfold through surveillance drones. What they witnessed defied explanation. "The human's suit," observed Science Officer Taylor, her voice hushed with awe. "It appears to be learning." The combat footage showed the Nemesis operative adapting with each engagement, the armor shifting minutely to counter new Karathi tactics. When they deployed sonic disruptors, the suit dampened the frequencies. When they switched to thermal lances, the armor's surface temperature dropped to near absolute zero, causing the beams to diffract harmlessly. "This isn't just advanced technology," Kalra murmured. "This is something else entirely." On the battlefield, Operative Eridani spoke into a wrist communicator. "Kronos, tactical assessment," a voice responded, audible only to the human. "Karathi forces at 82% capacity, detecting reinforcements inbound from orbital positions. Recommend deployment of Shade Protocol." Acknowledged. The human reached to a utility belt and removed what appeared to be a small metallic sphere. With a precise motion, Eridani tossed it high into the air above the battlefield. Varrock barked orders to shoot it down, but before his soldiers could react, the sphere burst apart into thousands of microscopic particles that dispersed into the air like mist. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screaming began. Karathi soldiers clutched at their helmets as the nanites infiltrated their command systems, bypassing security measures that had been considered impenetrable. Neural links between troops and their equipment severed. Battlefield data corrupted. Communication channels filled with static and whispers. Inhuman voices speaking in a language none could understand, but all could feel drilling into their consciousness. "What manner of warfare is this?" Varrock demanded, his own neural implants burning with interference. On the Vraxian command ship, the officers watched in horrified fascination. "Admiral," Mavis reported, "I'm detecting unusual activity from the human ship still in orbit." She paused, rechecking her readings. "It appears to be broadcasting something directly into the Karathi fleet's navigation systems." Lyrex leaned forward. "Show me." The display shifted to reveal the Karathi warships, previously arranged in perfect attack formation, now moving erratically. Several smaller vessels collided with one another as their guidance systems failed. The massive dreadnought at the fleet center began firing indiscriminately, its weapons targeting friendly ships. Back on the surface, Operative Eridani stood motionless in the center of the chaos, seemingly undisturbed by the pandemonium. The human's voice carried across the battlefield, amplified by some unseen technology. "The Nemesis Protocol was created for precisely this scenario, Commander Varrock. You target peaceful civilizations because you believe technological advancement without military focus creates vulnerability." The human took a step forward. "Humanity learned differently. We advanced our sciences not to wage war, but to end it decisively when necessary." Varrock managed to stabilize his neural implants long enough to draw his ceremonial blade, charging at the human with rage contorting his features. "Die, Earth creature!" Eridani sidestepped the attack with fluid grace, catching Varrock's arm and applying precise pressure. The blade clattered to the ground as the Karathi commander fell to his knees, paralyzed by a neural disruptor now attached to his spine. "Your empire calls itself unstoppable," Eridani said quietly. "But you've never encountered humanity before, and what you're witnessing isn't even a fraction of what we can unleash." As if to emphasize the point, The sky above suddenly filled with thousands of identical pods descending from the human vessel, each one containing not soldiers, but autonomous combat systems that began systematically dismantling the Karathi ground forces. The tide had turned, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Vraxian High Council chamber buzzed with apprehension as Admiral Lyrex presented his report. 3 solar cycles had passed since the humans' arrival, and the Karathi invasion force had been utterly neutralized. Not destroyed, neutralized. Most were still alive, but their neural systems had been reset to basic functions only. Their mighty warships drifted in controlled orbits, weapon systems disabled, crews in a state of induced stasis. The human calls it proportional response, Lyrex explained to the assembled counselors. They disabled rather than destroyed wherever possible. High Counselor Nevia, eldest of the Vraxian leadership, leaned forward on her hover chair. And what do they want in return for this intervention? Before Lyrex could respond, the chamber doors slid open. Operative Eridani entered, now without the combat armor, revealing a surprisingly ordinary humanoid form. Tall and lean, with silver-gray hair cropped close to the scalp. The human's most striking feature was those same ice-blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything with clinical precision. Nothing, Eridani stated simply, voice softer without the armor's amplification systems. Humanity requires nothing in return. The council members exchanged glances. In their experience, no species offered help without expecting compensation. Forgive our skepticism, Nevea replied. But intervention of this magnitude typically comes with conditions. Eridani smiled, a small, tight expression that didn't reach those calculating eyes. The only condition is information. We wish to understand the Karathi better, to ensure this doesn't happen again. Science Officer Taylor, invited to the session due to her expertise, couldn't contain her curiosity. Your technology, it's unlike anything in known space. The adaptive armor, the nanite deployment systems, the neural interfaces. How did humanity develop such capabilities while remaining unknown to the galactic community? By choice, Eridani replied, taking a seat when gestured to do so. Humanity expanded slowly, cautiously. We observed before engaging. When we discovered evidence of the Karathi campaigns against peaceful worlds, we began developing countermeasures. You were preparing for them specifically? Commander Kaelra asked. We prepare for all threats. Eridani's gaze swept the room. Project Nemesis was created to be the perfect counter to militaristic expansion. Not to conquer, not to destroy, but to end conflicts before they can spread. A younger counselor, Rivex, spoke up. And what gives humanity the right to make these judgments? To decide who constitutes a threat? Eridani didn't flinch at the challenge. Experience. Humanity nearly destroyed itself in its early history. We evolved beyond that self-destructive path, but we remember the cost. We recognize the patterns in others. Outside the council chambers, teams of smaller autonomous units, each about the size of a Vraxian child, moved efficiently through the city, repairing damage from the brief Karathi bombardment. The machines worked with precision, rebuilding structures, restoring power systems, even healing injured civilians with advanced medical technology. Aboard the orbiting human vessel, now identified as the HSV Restitution, a holographic interface, flickered as it communicated with Eridani's neural implant. Operation status? The ship's AI, Kronos, inquired. Eridani subvocalized the response. Proceeding as expected. The Vraxians are cautious but receptive. Their scientific curiosity is overriding their fear. Karathi prisoners are secured. Neural scans indicate 82% can be rehabilitated with memory modification protocols. Recommend implementation. Negative, Eridani replied. No memory alteration without consent. Standard containment only. The AI paused, processing this directive against its programming. Acknowledged. Though less efficient, it aligns with humanitarian protocols. Back in the council chamber, Nevaeh had reached a decision. We accept your assistance, Operative Eridani, and thank humanity for its intervention. However, we request transparency moving forward. If we are to trust you, we must understand what we're aligning ourselves with. Eridani nodded solemnly. That's reasonable, but understand this. What you've witnessed is merely one aspect of humanity's defensive capabilities. Project Nemesis represents our response to conventional warfare. There are other projects, other operatives, designed for different threats. Such as, Lyrex asked, Project Orpheus for dimensional incursions, Project Athena for mimetic warfare, Project Hermes for faster-than-light threats. Eridani leaned forward slightly. Humanity learned long ago that the universe contains dangers beyond conventional understanding. We've prepared accordingly. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Vraxians had always prided themselves on their scientific advancement. But what the human described went beyond their understanding of what was possible. Tomorrow, Eridani continued, I will begin transferring basic defensive technologies to your people, enough to ensure the Karathi or others like them won't threaten you again. But first, there's something you need to understand about what humanity truly is. The operative's eyes seemed to darken slightly. We are not conquerors. We are not saviors. We are the consequence of a universe that taught us to be prepared for the worst. Eridani's voice remained soft, but carried throughout the chamber. And what landed on your world today was just the beginning of what we can unleash when peace is threatened. The Karathi Supreme Council had not expected to see Supreme Commander Varrock again. At least, not alive. The massive war leader knelt before them, his once proud posture diminished, eyes downcast. Behind him stood two humans in the same black armor that had decimated his forces, though these wore no helmets. One male, one female, both watching the proceedings with the same detached interest of scientists observing a laboratory specimen. Explain yourself, Commander, growled Warlord Kazak, the eldest council member. How did the mightiest fleet in the Karathi Empire fall to a single adversary? Varrock looked up, and the council members recoiled slightly. Something in his eyes had changed. The fanatical devotion to conquest had been replaced by something unfamiliar to Karathi culture. Introspection. They are not what we thought, my lords, Varrock said, his voice hoarse. The humans, they could have annihilated us completely. Instead, they disabled our weapons, immobilized our forces, and brought me here to deliver a message. The female human stepped forward. Unlike Operative Eridani, her features were sharp, her skin a deep umber, with eyes like polished amber. The insignia on her armor identified her as Operative Lyra, Project Athena. The Karathi Empire has expanded unchecked for too long, she stated without preamble. Your council believed that might alone determines the right to rule. Today, we've demonstrated that your might is insufficient. Kazak roared, slamming his armored fist on the council table. You dare threaten us in our own fortress world? Our reserves are endless. We will— You misunderstand, interrupted the male human, his voice carrying a strange accent. Operative Amari, Project Orpheus. He introduced himself with a slight nod. This is not a negotiation or a threat. This is notification of a new reality. Operative Lyra gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the council chamber. It showed thousands of tiny points of light surrounding the Karathi home system. While your attention was focused on the Vraxian campaign, we deployed observation platforms throughout your territory, she explained, each one capable of executing a localized Nemesis protocol if aggressive expansion continues. The council fell silent, the implications clear. Amari continued where she left off. Humanity has existed alongside your empire for centuries, watching and learning. You never detected us because we chose not to be detected. Your neural networks, your communication systems, your weapons platforms, we've studied them all. Impossible, whispered one of the younger counselors. Our cybersecurity is based on quantum encryption developed 300 years ago, Lyra finished for him. Humanity surpassed that technology before we reached the stars. Varrock finally spoke again. My lords, I have seen what one human operative can do. They control technologies that defy explanation. The being who defeated me, Eridani, moved through our defenses like they weren't there. And when I was captured, I was shown things. His voice faltered, and for the first time in recorded history, a Karathi Supreme Commander trembled visibly. What? Things? Demanded Kazak. Earth, Varrock answered simply. Their home world, protected by defenses that make our greatest weapons look like children's toys. Cities that extend into orbit. Shipyards building vessels that don't just travel through space, they bend it. On the holographic display, the image shifted to show the Sol system, and specifically, the orbital infrastructure surrounding Earth. Massive construction facilities. Defense platforms that seem to phase in and out of normal space, and fleets of ships with configurations unlike anything the Karathi had encountered. This is a fraction of what we maintain around just one world, Amari stated. We have many. Lyra stepped closer to the council table. The Nemesis Protocol is designed specifically to counter expansionist military powers like yours. It adapts to your strategies, counters your technologies, and neutralizes your advantages. What you witnessed on Vraxis Prime was a measured response. A warning shot. What do you want? Kazak finally asked, his belligerence tempered by the undeniable evidence before him. Peace, Lyra replied immediately. Stability, the end of conquest as your empire's primary directive. Amari added, you have two options. Reform your empire to respect the sovereignty of other species, or face containment, not destruction. Humanity doesn't seek your extinction, but your days of unchecked expansion are over. The council chamber erupted into shouts and protests until Varrock's voice cut through the chaos. I have seen what they can do, he thundered. Our greatest warriors, our most advanced systems, rendered useless in moments. And the human told me this was merely a demonstration. As if to punctuate his statement, every piece of technology in the chamber, from personal shields to communication devices, suddenly deactivated simultaneously. The lights dimmed, then returned, a silent reminder of the human's capabilities. You have one planetary rotation to decide, Lyra stated calmly as she and Amari turned to leave. Commander Varrock will remain to provide his full account of what occurred on Vraxis Prime. We suggest you listen carefully. The doors sealed behind them, leaving the Karathi leadership to confront a reality they had never anticipated, one where they were not the apex predators of the galaxy, and somewhere in orbit above them, silent and unseen, the human vessel waited for their answer. They're calling it the Pax Humana, Operative Eridani reported, standing before the holographic assembly of Nemesis project directors. The term is spreading throughout 7 star clusters already. The secure communication took place in a shielded chamber aboard the HSV Restitution, now orbiting Vraxis Prime as restoration efforts continued on the planet below. The 5 directors, each responsible for overseeing a different aspect of humanities. Defensive protocols appeared as shimmering blue projections arranged in a semicircle. Director Isolde, head of diplomatic operations, frowned slightly. That wasn't our intention. We're not establishing an empire or hegemony. Perceptions matter more than intentions, countered Director Kiros, the scarred veteran who oversaw tactical response. The Vraxians see us as saviors. The Karathi see us as conquerors. Other species are watching and drawing their own conclusions. Eridani remained perfectly still, a habit from years of combat operations where unnecessary movement could trigger sensors. The Korathi High Command has agreed to our terms. They're withdrawing from occupied territories and dismantling their most aggressive weapons platforms. And you believe they'll comply? Asked Director Maylene, her expression skeptical. As head of intelligence analysis, she had spent decades studying Korathi expansion patterns. They will, Eridani confirmed. Operatives Lyra and Amari made quite an impression. Additionally, we've placed monitoring systems throughout their territory. Any attempt to rebuild their war machine will trigger automatic countermeasures. The central figure among the directors, a tall woman with silver implants visible at her temples, leaned forward. Director Vashti, founder of Project Nemesis and architect of humanity's defensive doctrine, studied Eridani carefully. And the psychological impact? You were authorized to deploy Revenant Protocol if necessary? Did you? Eridani's expression remained neutral. Minimal deployment only. Commander Varrock was shown selected imagery of Earth's defensive capabilities. No actual neural induction was required. The directors exchanged glances. Revenant, the ability to implant synthetic memories of events that never occurred, was considered one of humanity's most ethically questionable technologies. That it hadn't been necessary was a positive sign. And the Vraxians? Asked the fifth director, Nasir, whose expertise in xenobiology and cultural integration made him the project's conscience. How are they adapting to their new reality? At this, Eridani's expression softened slightly. Better than expected. Their scientific curiosity is overwhelming any fear. The technology transfer has begun. Defensive systems only as authorized. They're quick learners. Director Vashti nodded slowly. The Observational Council is satisfied with the outcome but concerned about the broader implications. This marks our most visible intervention to date. The galaxy now knows humanity exists, and they've seen a fraction of what we can do. Should we be concerned about coalition building against us? Asked Kiros bluntly. Maylene shook her head. Unlikely in the short term. Most species are celebrating the Korathi setback. They've made too many enemies during their expansion. Nevertheless, Vashti continued, we need to be prepared for increased scrutiny. Eridani, you'll remain at Vraxis Prime for one more planetary cycle, then extract. The diplomatic team will take over the transition process. Understood, Director. As the meeting concluded and the holographic projections faded, Eridani remained in the chamber, lost in thought. A soft chime indicated the presence of another person requesting entry. The door slid open to reveal Science Officer Taylor from the Vraxian High Command. Forgive the intrusion, she said hesitantly, her translucent skin catching the light of the ship's interior. Admiral Lyrex sent me to discuss the shield harmonics transfer, but your ship's AI said you were in conference. Eridani gestured for her to enter. The meeting just concluded. Kronos is integrating the shield specifications with your planetary defense network now. Taylor stepped inside, her large, multifaceted eyes taking in the communication chamber with undisguised fascination. This technology, it's centuries beyond anything we've developed. Yet you say humanity doesn't consider itself a warrior species? We're not, Eridani confirmed, leading her toward a view screen showing the planet below. But we learned early, in our development, that peace requires strength. Not just military strength, technological, cultural, ethical strength. The Korathi would call that weakness, Taylor observed. The Korathi are learning the cost of that misconception. Eridani's voice carried no satisfaction, only certainty. Project Nemesis wasn't created for conquest. It was created to preserve life. Taylor studied the human carefully. You speak of preservation, yet you wield weapons of unimaginable power. The contradictions in your species fascinate me. The greatest weapon humanity developed wasn't the Nemesis Protocol, Eridani said quietly. It was restraint. The knowledge that we could destroy and the will to choose not to. Outside the viewport, a formation of smaller Vraxian vessels practiced maneuvers alongside human defense drones, learning to operate the new technologies they'd been given. Below, on the planet's surface, the rebuilding continued. And across the galaxy, word spread of the species that had emerged from nowhere to humble the mighty Karathi Empire, not through greater brutality, but through superior strategy and technology. So advanced it bordered on the incomprehensible. The age of unchecked conquest was ending. Something new was beginning, and humanity, long content to watch from the shadows, had finally revealed itself as the galaxy's most enigmatic guardian. 2. Standard years after the events on Vraxis Prime, the Galactic Conclave convened for the first time in living memory. Representatives from 17 spacefaring species gathered on the neutral platform orbiting the pulsar TS-117, a location chosen for its symbolic significance, a place of intense energy and light, visible across vast distances. Among them stood Neva, now Supreme Counselor of the Vraxian Collective, her hoverchair adorned with symbols of her people's renaissance. Beside her, surprisingly, was Kazak of the Karathi, his traditional battle regalia replaced with the simpler garments of a diplomat, a transformation few had believed possible, and representing humanity, not operative Eridani, but a woman introduced. Simply as Ambassador Rylan, her only distinguishing feature a small insignia on her collar, a double helix intertwined with a star, the emblem of Earth's diplomatic corps. "This conclave has been called," announced the neutral facilitator, a gaseous entity from the Cepheid Confederation, "to address the emergence of humanity into galactic affairs and the implications of their intervention policies. The chamber, designed to accommodate the physiological needs of vastly different species, hummed with translation fields and environmental bubbles. At its center, a holographic display showed the known galaxy, with indicators highlighting recent conflict zones now stabilized under what many had indeed begun calling the Pax Humana. Ambassador Rylan spoke first, her voice calm and measured. "Humanity thanks the Conclave for this opportunity to address concerns directly. We understand our actions have disrupted established power dynamics." "Disrupted?" hissed the representative from the Sarathi Dominion, a reptilian species known for their mercenary fleets. "You've completely rewritten them. The Karathi Empire, once the most feared military force in 3 sectors, now speaks of trade agreements and cultural exchange." Kazak rumbled in acknowledgement, but showed no anger. "The Karathi have indeed changed course. After witnessing humanity's capabilities, we recognized that our path of conquest was ultimately self-limiting. We had become specialists in destruction, blind to other forms of power." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. "And what assurance do we have," demanded the Sarathi, "that humanity won't simply replace the Karathi as the new galactic hegemon? Your technology clearly surpasses anything we possess." Ambassador Rylan nodded, acknowledging the legitimacy of the concern. "A fair question. If you'll permit me, I'd like to explain humanity's perspective and why we chose to remain hidden for so long." The holographic display shifted, showing Earth as it had been centuries ago, scarred by war, environmental collapse, and division. Then it evolved, showing the gradual healing of the planet, the development of orbital habitats, and finally humanity's careful expansion into the stars. "We nearly destroyed ourselves," Rylan explained. "When we finally achieved unity, we made a foundational decision. We would explore the galaxy not as conquerors, but as observers, and, when necessary, guardians. Guardians who just happen to possess weapons that can neutralize entire fleets," noted the Cepheid facilitator. "Precisely because we understand the temptation such power brings," Rylan countered. "Project Nemesis was developed not to enforce human dominance, but to create balance, to ensure that no species could do to others what we nearly did to ourselves." Nevia's voice rose clearly. "The Vraxian Collective can attest to humanity's restraint. They could have established a permanent presence in our system, demanded resources, or forced an alliance. Instead, they provided defensive capabilities, restored our infrastructure, and departed, asking nothing in return." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. "What do humans want?" asked a representative from the enigmatic Luvari consciousness, speaking aloud for the first time. "Truly?" Ambassador Ryland smiled slightly. "To know we're not alone in understanding that advancement without wisdom leads to destruction. To build a galaxy where strength protects rather than dominates." "Pretty words," scoffed the Sarathi. "But power corrupts. Even humans must be susceptible." "Absolutely," Rylan agreed immediately, surprising the assembly. "Which is why Project Nemesis isn't controlled by a single authority. Our operatives answer to multiple oversight bodies, including non-human observers. The same technology that allows us to disable other weapon systems is applied to our own, built-in limitations that prevent misuse." The holographic display shifted again, showing the structure of humanity's intervention protocols, the checks and balances, the ethical frameworks, the strict criteria that had to be met before deployment was authorized. "We don't seek to rule," Rylan continued. "We seek to create conditions where rule by force becomes obsolete." As the conclave proceeded into its third day, something unprecedented began to emerge: cautious optimism. Species that had existed in states of perpetual military readiness began discussing demilitarized zones. Trade routes previously controlled by mercenary fleets were declared neutral passageways. On the evening of the final day, Ambassador Rylan met privately with Nevaeh and Kazakh in an observation dome overlooking the pulsar. "It's working better than we anticipated," Rylan admitted, watching the brilliant jets of energy streaming from the stellar remnant. "The Nemesis demonstration was calculated to create exactly this opening for dialogue." Kazakh's expression remained solemn. "The Karathi remember our history. We were not always conquerors. Before the resource wars 1,000 years ago, we were builders, engineers. Perhaps we can be again." "You already are," Nevaeh observed. "The Vraxian Karathi Reconstruction Initiative has rebuilt 16 worlds in 2 years. Former enemies working together." Ryland's communicator chimed softly. She checked it, her expression shifting subtly. "It seems the conclave has reached its decision." When they returned to the chamber, the facilitator announced the results: the formation of the first, truly galactic governing body with representatives from all spacefaring species, including humanity. Not an empire, not a federation, but a council of equals bound by shared principles. And the first resolution passed unanimously: the adoption of the Nemesis Protocol as a shared defensive framework, with its technologies adapted for use by all member species under careful oversight. As the historic session concluded, Ambassador Rylan transmitted a simple message back to Earth: "Nemesis, Phase 1 complete. The seed is planted." Across the vast distances of space, on a secure facility orbiting Jupiter, Director Vashti received the message and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The gamble had paid off. The galaxy had taken its first steps toward the future humanity had long envisioned, one where advanced technology served as the foundation for peace rather than the means of destruction. "Send the authorization," she instructed her staff. "Begin Phase 2. Throughout the galaxy, dormant systems hidden within the Nemesis technologies already transferred to other species quietly activated, not weapons or surveillance, but communication nodes, creating the foundation for a network that would eventually bind all sentient civilizations together. The distress signal sent by the Vraxians had indeed brought humanity's darkest weapon to bear: the truth that cooperation could be more powerful than conquest, that guardianship could replace domination, and that even the most warlike species could evolve beyond their violent past. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter that night as a new era of galactic history began, not with a bang, but with understanding.